The corridors of the drifting trade station known as Iron Requiem stank of rust, ozone, and something far worse, the breath of a dying machine that refused to die. Emergency lights fluttered like broken stars, painting every surface in jagged stabs of red and white. The groans of warped steel accompanied the labored wheeze of life support fans struggling to circulate air that was already heavy with decay. Anyone who had spent time here knew the station wasn't just failing, it was rotting, alive in its own strange way, like a beast left too long in a cage. Kieran Holt moved through the maintenance shafts with quiet precision, his hands gliding over tangled conduits and stubborn valves. A hydrospanner hummed faintly in his grip, its casing customized with a dozen tweaks only he understood. Outwardly, the tool looked ordinary, like Kieran himself, another faceless mechanic who survived by staying useful but never indispensable. In truth, he always shaved more efficiency out of the system than he reported. A quiet reserve of capability, hidden from those who might exploit it. He had learned the delicate balance of survival. Show too little skill, and you'd be tossed out an airlock. Show too much, and Captain Grawl, the station's bloated slaver lord, would drain you dry of knowledge until you broke, or sell you to someone crueler. The memory came back, unbidden, while his hands worked. The orbital platform burning, his comms filled with screams. Corporate orders declaring their squad's extraction non-viable. Abandoned. Left to die because saving them didn't balance against the ledger. Kieran had stolen a shuttle that day and saved 3 people. For his disobedience, Helix Corporation court-martialed him, not for failing to save the others, but for damaging property, the shuttle he'd stolen. Machines and profit were always worth more than lives. He stayed bent over his work when boots thundered down the passage. Survival instinct made him small, silent, invisible. Trouble here always arrived wearing Graal's sneer. Move, property. Graal's voice rumbled like broken stone. He filled the corridor, dragging someone behind him. Kieran didn't look directly, but he caught the color in his periphery, a flare of crimson skin against the gray steel. The captive stumbled forward, shoved into the cargo bay for display. She straightened instantly, though chains clamped her wrists. Even through the grime of her torn uniform, her presence radiated sharp defiance. Saris Vey, her name whispered later, but in this moment she was simply a symbol, a dissident stripped bare before them. Her skin was the red of heated iron, her hair a deeper shade of scarlet that seemed to burn even in the dim light. Graal yanked her upright by that hair, forcing her face toward the watching workers. This is what happens when one of mine forgets their place. His laughter rattled like machinery grinding to failure. A revolutionary. A messenger to the resistance. Kieran's grip tightened on the hydrospanner. For a heartbeat, he imagined slamming it into the slaver's skull. But he counted 6 enforcers at Graal's back, plus cameras, plus nowhere to run. The thought evaporated, leaving only the sour taste of cowardice. He stayed bent to his work. Machines never judged him, at least until her eyes found his. Violet eyes. Fierce, merciless, unyielding. She did not beg. She did not plead. She looked at him, and in that gaze he saw again the soldiers he had failed to reach, mouths silently asking, "Why did you let us die?" Graal shoved her into a holding cage, its bars forged from alloy strong enough to hold beasts twice her size. The magnetic clamp locked with a hiss. "Everything on this station belongs to me," Graal growled, his voice carrying through the bay. "Everything. Everyone." The crew scattered back to their duties, eager to vanish into anonymity. Kieran pretended to calibrate a valve while Saris's stare burned into his back, branding him as complicit. Even after Graal stormed out, the weight of her gaze lingered, crushing, merciless. Hours later, long after lights dimmed to simulate night, Kieran should have been asleep in his bunk. Instead, he carried a flask of clean water through shadowed corridors, slipping between blind spots in the surveillance grid he had memorized. The cargo bay was quiet save for the groan of the station. The flask clinked softly as he placed it just outside the bars of Ceres's cage. "Drink," he muttered. His voice cracked like old metal. She didn't move. Didn't even look at him. The silence stretched until it cut. When she finally spoke, her words were soft, sharp, and damning. "He who sees evil and does nothing is its accomplice." The sentence hit Kieran like a physical blow. His chest ached under the weight of it. He lashed back with bitterness. "And what do they teach you on Vaynar Prime? That the universe is divided into heroes and villains? I've seen plenty die with purpose. Their deaths filled corporate spreadsheets. Their noble sacrifice balanced quarterly profits." Her violet eyes turned to him at last. "They teach us indifference is the ally of oppression. Better to die with meaning than live without it." He had no answer. She was right, and she knew it. He turned to leave, clinging to silence like armor. Her voice followed him, calm and almost amused. "Your escape plan behind Storage Bay 12, it isn't as hidden as you think." He froze, fists tightening. No one should have known about that shaft. Months of mapping, testing, memorizing. His one fragile hope, spoken aloud by someone locked behind bars. He spun back toward her, but Ceres had closed her eyes, leaning against cold steel. Her injured wrists rested in her lap. She seemed indifferent, though her hand stretched subtly toward the water once he was gone. Kieran did not sleep that night. When he closed his eyes, violet fire stared back, whispering accomplice. The station groaned under its own weight, as though Iron Requiem were alive and sick. Kieran crouched at an environmental control panel, fingers buried in the tangle of wiring, when the low hum of sensors shifted into a higher pitch. His chest tightened. That sound meant something big, something dangerous. He kept his head down, pretending calm, though his pulse hammered. Across the bay, Ceres Vey sat on the floor of her cell, her red skin dulled by exhaustion but her violet eyes bright, sharp, impossible to ignore. The empty flask rested neatly by the bars. She hadn't spoken since last night, yet Kieran could feel her attention on him, like a spotlight no shadows could soften. He muttered, 3 ships. No transponders. They've been running dark, shadowing us for hours. You reported it? Her voice was steady, commanding. Kieran nodded once. To Graal's second. He called it miners. Miners don't fly in tactical formation, Ceres replied. She pushed herself upright, gripping the bars. It's the Crimson Collective. They've come for me. The name carried a weight Kieran didn't like. Freedom fighters or terrorists, he asked. Her lips twisted into something not quite a smile. Both. Neither. Depends on who writes the history. He opened his mouth to demand answers, but the station shook beneath his boots. The first salvo slammed into Iron Requiem's aging shields, tearing through conduits and rattling loose panels. Red alarms flared to life, bathing everything in stuttering crimson. All hands to battle stations. Graal's voice roared over the intercom. Engineering, reroute power to forward shields. Chaos erupted. Workers scrambled, enforcers armed themselves, smoke poured from ruptured conduits. A support beam snapped loose overhead, crushing a technician in a wet crunch. Sparks spat from Kieran's panel, searing his arm. He bit back a cry, clutching the burn. Through the haze, he saw 2 enforcers moving toward Ceres's cell, weapons drawn. Their intent was obvious, better to kill the prisoner than risk her rescue. Something broke inside him. For too long, he had hidden behind survival. For too long, he had lived as a shadow. His body moved before his mind caught up. He snatched up a length of broken pipe, charging forward. The first enforcer dropped with a strike to the knee. The second spun, blaster rising, but Kieran was already on him. Years of military training resurfaced in a blur of instinct, a blow to the gut, a strike to the skull, and the man collapsed. Breathing ragged, Kieran stood over them, the pipe trembling in his hands. Sarah stared at him with new intensity. "You've had combat training," she observed, voice low but certain. Kieran had no time to answer. Another blast rocked the station, closer this time. Sparks cascaded from the ceiling. The shields were buckling. The auxiliary line. Sarah shouted from her cage. "Behind the main coolant pipe, you can reroute flow." Kieran hesitated. "Trust a prisoner?" But the station groaned again, metal shrieking under pressure. He had no other choice. He dove for the service panel she indicated, slicing it open with his cutter. Inside, exactly where she said, two couplings glowed. Red and blue, disconnect, reconnect to tertiary outlet. 3 seconds before surge kicks in. Don't hesitate. Her words were crisp, precise. The moment he touched the junction, electricity arced up his arm. Agony ripped through his body, but he gritted his teeth and forced the connection. The shields flared, stabilizing just as the next barrage struck. The station held, for now. Kieran slumped against the bulkhead, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. He looked back at Saris. "How did you know that? Those schematics aren't even in the database." Her mouth tightened. "I was an engineer before a revolutionary. I designed systems like this for the Empire." She spat the word like poison. "My own work keeps me in chains." Kieran fumbled his medkit, tossing it through the bars. "For your wounds." Instead of treating herself, she tore a strip from her tattered uniform and reached through the bars. "Your arm first." Her hands were steady, practiced, as she wrapped the burn with firm precision. Kieran allowed it, silent. Their eyes met, violet on gray, and for a breath the chaos around them fell away. "You saved me," she murmured. "I'm just a mechanic," he muttered. "You're more than that." Before he could respond, an alarm shrieked louder than the rest. Graal's voice cut through, furious. "They're targeting the engines. Jettisoning cargo bay for mass reduction. 5 minutes to separation." Kieran's blood went cold. Jettisoning the bay wasn't strategy, it was execution. Everyone here, flushed into space to die. The countdown blazed across a wall display, 05:00. 04:59. Panic spread. Crew bolted for exits. Kieran and Saris were left in the hollowing echo of desperation. He rushed to the cell, cutter blazing against the magnetic lock. Sparks flew, metal groaned, but the tool sputtered and died, fried by earlier damage. "Damn it!" He slammed his fist against the bars. The timer read 2:17. He seized a pipe, trying to pry, bending metal but making no progress. The lock was military grade. "Not like this," Kieran muttered. "Not here." "Then you'll need help," a rasping voice said. He spun. At the bay entrance stood Torvak, the old six-limbed engineer who had once saved him from corporate assassins. Plasma torch in hand, eyes cloudy but determined, Torvak moved with surprising speed. The flame roared to life, biting into the lock. "It's working!" Kieran cried, hope flaring. A blaster shot cracked. Torvak staggered, smoke rising from a hole in his chest. He fell forward, torch clattering across the floor. Behind him, one of Graal's enforcers stepped from the shadows, weapon still raised. "Captain's orders. No survivors." The timer screamed down, 01:35. The torch sputtered out on the floor, its plasma core cracked by the blaster shot. Kieran dropped to his knees beside Torvak, pressing a trembling hand to the old alien's chest. The six-limbed engineer's milky eyes stared past him, unblinking. The being who had smuggled him aboard years ago, who gave him a cover name and taught him how to survive, was gone. "You should have left months ago," Kieran whispered, grief choking his voice. "I should have taken you with me." The timer loomed, merciless, 01:12. 01:11. The enforcer raised his blaster to finish the job. Kieran rolled, grabbing the discarded weapon from an unconscious guard. He fired without aiming, his shot catching the enforcer in the shoulder. The man crumpled, weapon clattering to the deck. Kieran scrambled to the plasma torch. Useless. The cell door remained sealed. His arms shook from the effort of prying with a pipe. The lock didn't budge. Sweat stung his eyes. The timer glared back, 00:58. "We're out of time," Kieran muttered, despair creeping in. "I can't break it." Across the bars, Saris's expression shifted. The stubborn fire in her gaze deepened into something darker, older, almost sacred. She straightened, shoulders squaring despite the chains. "Then I will." Kieran blinked. "What are you?" Her voice cut him off, firm, resonant. "Stand back." She stepped to the rear of the cage, crimson skin gleaming with sweat. Her breathing slowed into a steady rhythm, like a fighter preparing for ritual. Memories flickered across her face, training grounds on Vaynar Prime, her mentor's gravelly voice teaching the last resort art of the breaking fist. "Your bones will shatter. The pain will be unbearable. But it is the final defense of our people. Use it only when death is certain." Death was certain now. Kieran pressed himself against the wall, fear and awe colliding in his chest. Saris lunged. Her right fist blurred into motion, red skin taut over steel-dense bone. The strike landed with the force of a meteor. The cell lock didn't just crack, it detonated, shards of alloy spraying the deck like shrapnel. The entire door collapsed inward with a scream of tortured hinges. Her cry tore through the bay, a guttural sound of agony. She fell forward, cradling her ruined arm. Bone jutted beneath her crimson skin, white fragments piercing through in gruesome splinters. Blood streamed down her wrist. Kieran's stomach lurched. The breaking fist hadn't damaged her arm, it had destroyed it. She would never be the same again. "Run," she hissed, teeth clenched against the pain. "Now." The timer blared, 00:29. Kieran grabbed her good arm, slung it over his shoulder, and pulled her toward the bay doors as they sealed shut. He dove, dragging her with him, tumbling into the corridor just as the doors clamped closed. Behind them, the cargo bay shuddered, clamps releasing with a thunderous clang. Through a viewport, Kieran watched the vast section of the station drift away like a coffin. Torvak's body was still inside. Along with the unconscious enforcer. A moment later, enemy fire lanced across space, vaporizing the detached bay in a blaze of white light. The shockwave hammered iron requiem, rattling bulkheads and sending both Kieran and Saris sprawling against the corridor wall. Her broken arm struck metal, and she gasped, collapsing against him. Sweat beaded her forehead. "Still," she forced words past clenched teeth. "Bridge, we have to, stop Grull." Kieran hauled her upright, guiding her through the chaos. Sirens wailed, the station convulsed under fire, and terrified crew shoved past them in frantic escape. Nobody tried to stop the bloodied mechanic and the half-shattered dissident. They reached the bridge as the jump countdown flickered across consoles. Crew shouted, alarms wailed, and through the viewport 3 sleek warships prowled closer, their weapons glowing with another barrage. Captain Grull turned at their entrance, face contorting into fury. "You!" he roared at Saris. "How?" Before he could finish, the main viewscreen crackled to life. A cold, sharp-faced commander appeared, clad in the crimson insignia of the Collective, a rising sun skewered by a blade. "Surrender the dissident, Grull," he said, voice calm, deadly. Hand her over and you might survive. The bridge froze. All eyes turned toward Saris. Bloodied, her arm mangled beyond repair, she still stood tall, violet eyes blazing. Grawl sneered, spreading his hands. Take her. She's more trouble than she's worth. The collective commander frowned. So quickly? No negotiations? Consider it a gift, Grawl said smoothly. A savage who can't even stay behind a locked door, what use is she? The commander nodded once. Prepare to be boarded. No, Kieran said. His voice cut across the bridge, steadier than he felt. He stepped forward, blaster raised at Grawl's chest. She's not going with them. She's not staying with you. She's free. Grawl stared at him, disbelief melting into venom. You throw your life away for a slave? Saris moved then, stepping beside Kieran, broken arm hanging uselessly but her stance unbroken. Her voice rang across the bridge, clear and unwavering, that slave is my husband. The words landed like a thunderclap. The crew stilled. Even the collective commander leaned back, suspicion sharpening into calculation. Kieran's heart pounded. He hadn't agreed to anything, hadn't spoken, but Saris's words bound him tighter than steel. She looked at him, fierce and unyielding, as if daring him to deny it. He didn't. On the view screen, an officer whispered in the commander's ear. The Vaynar Bond. Sacred law. Recognized across the sector. Even the Empire won't violate it. The commander's eyes narrowed, but his voice faltered. So be it. His fleet peeled away, weapons cooling, the promise of return unspoken. Hours blurred as the station's battered crew worked to stabilize Iron Requiem. Breaches were sealed, shields patched, fires contained. Kieran threw himself into the work, no longer hiding his knowledge. He rerouted power, rebuilt conduits, and restored long-range sensors, improvements he once kept secret now shared openly. Meanwhile, Saris, her arm stabilized in a Meddroid's regeneration field, organized the crew with crisp efficiency. They listened. They obeyed. Her natural authority, sharpened by sacrifice, anchored them all. In Graal's former quarters, now a makeshift command center, star charts and datapads littered the desk. Saris traced potential routes with her good hand, her expression tight. The collective will be back. The Empire won't ignore a station like this forever. We'll need to be more than scavengers if we're going to survive. Kieran leaned beside her, watching her work. So what do we become? Her violet eyes flicked up. A haven. A sanctuary. Not just for us. For all those still hunted. For every refugee who needs shelter. Kieran let the words settle. Haven. Not just survival, but purpose. Then this station needs a new name. She tilted her head. What do you suggest? He thought of Torvak, of the others who had died here, of the hope he saw in her face. Haven Point. A tired but genuine smile touched her lips. Fitting. The console chimed. Long-range sensors displayed 3 collective ships still lurking at the edge of detection, joined now by reinforcements. A slow tightening blockade. They'll try again, Kieran murmured. Yes, Saris agreed, her voice firm. But this time we'll be ready. The next 3 days blurred into relentless work. The crew, free from Graal's tyranny, found renewed energy. Barricades were reinforced. Power grids rebalanced. Weapons scavenged from abandoned caches were installed across the station's frame. Kieran and Saris stood side by side through it all, 2 unlikely leaders reshaping a carcass of rust into something new. Every time he faltered, her violet eyes steadied him. Every time pain threatened to crush her, his quiet presence anchored her. By the 3rd night, they stood at the viewport together, watching the stars flicker beyond the blockade. This bond, Kieran said softly. Is it real, or just what you needed to survive the bridge? Saris leaned her forehead lightly against his shoulder. It's real if you keep choosing it. Each day. Each night. Until you don't. I will, Kieran said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. For as long as I breathe. The comm crackled. A transmission, Haven Point, this is Captain Joran of the Wayfarer's Luck. Requesting docking clearance, supply delivery. Kieran exchanged a glance with Saris. She gave a small nod. This is Kieran Holt, he answered, his voice steady. Acting Administrator of Haven Point. You're cleared for Bay 3. The trader's voice held a note of surprise at the station's new name, but he didn't ask questions. Smart men knew when not to. As the transmission ended, Saris turned to him with an amused look. Administrator? Kieran shrugged, a faint smile tugging his lips. Had to call it something. Her laughter, soft and unexpected, filled the command center. It was the first time Kieran had heard it. The sound struck him harder than any explosion. The laughter faded, but her smile lingered. You know this won't be easy. The collective will return. The Empire too. Even Graal's loyalists may try to take back what they lost. I know, Kieran said. His gaze held hers. But I'm done surviving. I'm ready to fight for something worth the pain. Her good hand slid into his, fingers tightening. Then we build. Together. Beyond the viewport, the collective ships shifted, their blockade lines hardening. The coming days promised fire and blood. But for the first time in years, Kieran felt steady. For the first time, he wasn't alone. They had turned a cage into a haven. Now they would defend it. And that's how Iron Requiem, a rusting husk ruled by fear, became Haven Point, a sanctuary born out of defiance and sacrifice. Kieran Holt, once a drifting mechanic hiding his talents, finally chose to stand and fight. Saris Vey, the crimson-skinned dissident who broke her own body to shatter her chains, became both leader and partner. Together, they forged more than an escape, they forged a purpose. But survival was only the beginning. The Crimson Collective still circles, watching. The Empire will not ignore whispers of a new sanctuary rising in the borderlands. Haven Point is fragile, a light in endless dark, and every light draws predators. Yet for all the dangers to come, there is hope here. Hope stitched from broken steel, violet eyes, and the laughter of someone who has finally found freedom. And that's the story you just witnessed. One part of a universe still sprawling, still dangerous, still alive with stories waiting to be told. If you want to see what becomes of Haven Point, if you want to follow Kieran and Saris into the battles, alliances, and betrayals that await, then make sure you stick with us. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Tap that like button if you enjoyed this tale of rebellion, survival, and found purpose. And don't forget to share this video with someone who loves science fiction as much as you do, help them discover Haven Point too. Every story we tell grows stronger with you. Until next time, keep looking to the stars.